back up and get us back in, and we'll play with this while we're live, because that's the joy of being live, is that everybody gets to see that we do screw things up, and we're trying our best to make it happen and stuff, because we're live now. So you can understand, we're working on Wired Word. We're trying to do a blended Wired Word this week, where we've got some people attending in person at the church, and we are working on getting things set up. And we're a little behind schedule today, but we didn't want to lose our audience, so we want to make sure that everybody knew that we were here, and we're working on this. Deb needs to turn the volume off on our computer so we don't get that echo. I think we're good now.
All right.
How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, Rob. How are you?
Good to see all of you. We're missing. We've only got 3 of you. We're kind of getting cut off there.
We might have
There
Harry.
we go. Come on, Harry. You can't hide on us. You can try if you want, but we don't want you to hide on us.
I tried getting her to scoot over. She shook her head no vigorously.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was going to be the case. So there she is.
Here we are.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Wired Word Bible Study Live, where, hey, we just throw it out here and wing it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So with us today, we've got a number of people, which is awesome. I love to see that and stuff. We've got Pastor Eric, obviously, as always. We got Pastor Corey from Faith Wesleyan Church over in Midland. And we've got a number of people at the church that are joining us and stuff. From what I can see, I see Harriet, Aunt Jane, and I just drew a total blank. Dorothy. It's like, it was there. And welcome to live work and stuff, where we just fumble around and try to get things done. So, and I know Deb's over there somewhere, but I think she's hiding on us as well.
She ran back to her office or something.
So, all right. Today's topic looks like we're going to talk about Americans with Disabilities Act turns 30 years old. So it's been 30 years since the ADA came out and whatnot. So I'm assuming that Deb's not going to be doing the reading because she decided to vacate and abandon us.
She's coming back.
So
I can slide over.
We only have one copy of this, though.
Oh. Well, then there
You want me to read? Is that what you're waiting for?
I'll just wait until we're ready to go.
Okay.
I'll read if we want to. I don't care.
Does everybody have Wired Word now? We're so unorganized today. Hey.
This is the joys of it.
All right. Americans with Disabilities Act turns 30. The Wired Word for August 9. July 26 marked the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, signed by President George H.W. Bush on that date in 1990. The act banned discrimination against people with many types of disabilities and required reasonable accommodations and accessibility in schools, employment, transportation, public places, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services. When the ADA became law, the New York Times described it as the most sweeping anti-discrimination measures since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it does, in fact, afford similar protection of Americans with disabilities to those the Civil Rights Act of 1964 affords against discrimination based on race, religion, sex, national origin, and other characteristics. The ADA did not come into being easily, but was the culmination of activism and struggle by people with disabilities to provide opportunities long denied. Many public places and programs were simply not designed to provide access to people who needed special accommodations. As an example, when Judy Heumann was growing up in the 1950s, the New York City school system barred her from attending school and instead gave her only 2.5 hours a week of home instruction because she was in a wheelchair as a result of polio. School administrators were unwilling to make the necessary changes to accommodate her in a classroom. Today, thanks to the ADA, no child can legally be denied schooling because of a disability. Public spaces and workplaces constructed since the Act's passage are required to be built to be accessible to people with disabilities, and for those without the necessary mobilities to use the public spaces. The ADA calls for other accommodations. The ADA did not become law without opposition along the way. Some business organizations said the cost of making the changes would have a disastrous effect on small business struggling to survive. Opposition to the proposed act from some religious groups resulted in churches being excluded from the mandate to make their buildings accessible. Some religious, I can't get the paper unstuck. Groups maintain that being required to make structural changes to their properties was a violation of religious liberty and improper intrusion of the federal government. Thus, the ADA does not apply to religious organizations and entities controlled by religious organizations. Many houses of worship have voluntarily made their properties accessible, however. On September 25, 2008, President George W. Bush signed the ADA Amendments Act of 2008 into law. The amendment broadened the definition of disability, thereby extending the ADA's protections to a greater number of people. Though some people have decried the expansion of what counts as a disability, others say the ADA needs to be further broadened to address barriers imposed by the digital age, and still others call for employment protections for people with disabilities during events such as the current pandemic. The big questions. Do you or does anyone you know benefit personally from the ADA access requirements? Have you or anyone you know been harmed unreasonably by or imposed on by any ADA rules and rulings, and how would their or your daily life be different if the ADA rules did not exist? So the first one, do you or does anyone you know benefit personally from the ADA access requirements?
I don't know of anybody right now, but as we all get older, if we know, we might down the road.
Yeah.
So
Are you able to hear them well enough online? Yes?
Yep, we can hear. We got pretty good audio on them, so it works.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, especially with having an older congregation, we do probably have a few people who are infected by it or are somewhat to do with it, but yet I haven't heard any concerns or
with Vern,
issues.
You
So
know, when he was, trying to come to church with his walker and stuff, so,
yeah,
and the walker.
Yeah, if needed, we have the wheelchair and
Yeah.
the walkway up for anyone who might have problems.
yeah. I know our church has been affected because of the fact that we had to put the
Right.
ramp in and stuff of that
Right.
nature.
Yeah.
So we've had to take those necessary steps. But I don't know if anybody personally. I mean, we used to when our son Ryan, who was born with multiple disabilities, but this was back a couple of years around that time, around the time that this act was just getting put in. So we really didn't have a lot with Ryan to deal
Mary
with a lot
Smith,
of
the
this.
daughter, remember when she used to come in her wheelchair she was totally handicapped. Her wheelchair was huge and they got it in here.
Yeah.
So this is talking too more about, the next question is, have you or anyone you know been harmed or unreasonably imposed on by any ADA rules or rulings? And how would their or your daily life be different if the ADA rules did not exist? I think there's a lot of people who are wheelchair bound that wouldn't have jobs if the
Right,
ADA
right.
laws didn't
Yep.
exist and things like that.
I know when we built the facility here, I mean, we had to, we didn't have to because of the way things were structured for it when we were building the else, because it's a residential structure and not a commercial. But we built, our bathroom out to ADA standards and everything because, we want to be accommodating for people. I think a lot of people do want to be accommodating. I can see some of the original pushback on it when it first came out was the concern of these people that would have to then go back and spend money retroing things.
Yeah.
And making them, because if I'd have built that bathroom half the size it is currently and stuff, and then all of a sudden I had to now expand it in order to make it comply, that would have been a very significant expense at that time. It's not that I don't want to accommodate people and stuff, but, so I could see where that might be an issue with affording things. But going forward, there's not a huge cost, issue with building the building to make sure it's compliant and stuff, unless you're dealing with multiple stories and things like that.
Number 2, what priority do you think government should place on addressing the needs of persons with disabilities during a pandemic? In your reply, distinguish between a government doing something itself and a government compelling others to do something.
I think obviously, people that have, special needs or whatever, that needs to be, made sure it's handled and stuff. But where I run into an issue is when people are treated, above and beyond everybody else. Because it's like everybody needs to be cared for. Everybody needs to be, the rules need to apply equally to all, type thing. So when it comes to the government getting involved in things and stuff, I mean, we need to make sure that, like during this pandemic, I guess I'm curious if they're referring back to this one, what exactly do they mean by that? What additional needs would somebody with a disability need that somebody that doesn't have a disability need due to the pandemic that we're dealing with?
Go ahead.
They've got access to hospitals, medical care, all those types of things. How would that differ, I guess?
Yeah.
Jane,
I'm trying to understand the context.
Sometimes it's easier to do something on your own instead of the government telling you what you have to do.
yeah, it is.
I could see if somebody was somebody was discriminating against people with disabilities because of the pandemic or something like that. I could see where that would be an issue to step in, but I don't see where the pandemic is causing undue hardship on somebody with a disability.
I can think of instances where it may be even better because, people who are in wheelchairs and are unable to drive can't go out. A lot of them still live alone, but they can't go out very well to get their groceries and things. And with the pandemic, we've created so much help with Shipt and people doing those kinds of things for people, even those of us that can go out, that they may not even have near as many problems during something like this because there's so many more things offered to help them out.
The one concern I would see that I see is a major concern is like now the hospitals are starting to open up to where people can actually come into the hospital with the patient, so they can have one person come in. But when this first started, if you had to go to the hospital for anything, then nobody else could go in with you.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, to go back to my son again, who couldn't speak for himself, couldn't walk and talk, he had to have I or Amy with him whenever we went in. And as of the way the pandemic was, if he had to go in for anything, we weren't allowed to go in with him, and that would never happen. First off, Amy would never have let him go in to see a doctor without her by his side. So, like I said, that would be an issue where I could see being an issue of their rule. They're starting to open it up more, where they're allowing at least one person in the room with the
When I had
patients.
my eye surgery a few weeks ago, my daughter had to sit out in her car and it was 90 degrees all the time.
Yeah.
And she was out there for over an hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
But like, so when you got patients who can't speak for themselves
Right,
and stuff,
absolutely.
Right.
you need somebody else there. And
Or
the
even-
rules of the pandemic at the time was that you couldn't. So
Even taking an elderly person to the doctor, they want an extra pair of ears there.
yeah.
I was gonna say, even with my mom and her Parkinson's, she doesn't remember things,
Right.
so we have to have one of us with her all the time. And they didn't let us, and she didn't go to the doctor very much during that time. So
Corey's been quiet. What's going on, Corey?
yeah,
I'm listening, and then I got a church situation that I'm also working on too. Sorry.
no, that's all right.
You're looking like you wanted to say something. We were like, okay, is he trying
No,
to?
I guess I can say something on the government. I feel like with these wire word Bibles, they talk about government things, and I feel like we push a lot of government in church, and I feel like it's a hard line when you're trying to talk biblical and government. I have a very in these situations of, because we all have feelings, how we feel like should or shouldn't what. And so when I read things about this, I feel like it's starting to infringe, that government's starting to creep into our churches, and I just gives me eerie feelings. Sorry.
Well, and that's the next question. Actually, you led into it there, and this is kind of one that I was starting to already think about. Do you think it's right that the houses of worship are not required to be accessible to persons with disability? Explain your answer. What does the statement, "We have no one here who needs handicap access," mean for the future of your church? Here's my thought on this, and where I think the government should be involved as far as regulations go, to making sure that people have access to things they need, stuff if they have a disability. I think that has to do with government services and like medical care, the things that are absolutely necessary that person gets and stuff. If a business or a church is not willing to make their facility accessible to somebody with a disability, why would that person with a disability even want to go there?
Right.
You
Yeah, that
know,
says a lot about the institution.
we put that huge ramp in on the we were required to do it. It's because we desire to do it, because we want people to be able to come to our facility. We want them to come and partake in worshiping with us and be part of our church family and stuff. I mean, I don't think it's right for the government to come in and regulate those types of things. Now if somebody's intentionally, pushing somebody out due to discrimination issues or something, then that's one thing. That's something that I think is definitely a violation of somebody's rights. But to go in and say, well, you have to do this in order for for this and this and this to happen, and it's like, I don't know of any church that would want to not make their building accessible if possible. Yeah. And I can understand some historical issues with it too, but as long as they've got systems and, if somebody did come up with if we didn't have the ramp on the side of our church, if somebody came up to the front door in a wheelchair that wanted to come to church, I can guarantee you we would find a way to get them in the building and get them to be there to worship with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Corey.
I said that's where when you look at it, I think houses of worship should think, no matter what, like when you're building a building. I mean, obviously historically you've got those avenues you got to really navigate, and think creatively how to get them in and out, and you name it. But to me, I think any church in today's standard, and I think they are, when you look at other churches, I mean, your church building is older. I mean, ours isn't as old as your church building is, but our church didn't think about handicap accessible. But at the time, like, we have a basement. There's no way for anybody who's handicapped to get down to our basement. But yet we're still a church that's all on one level. So if you can get into the church, which you can get to the sanctuary and the fellowship hall in there. But I think we have to start thinking about, if we're going to reach people, we have to say, hey, what is it may not be a requirement for us, but what is a requirement for a business, a corporate world business to bring people in and out. And then I think we have to make those decisions, saying we probably should make sure that we have this for the church for today and for the future. Not just say, hey, we don't need it now. We need to make sure that we're prepared, because we don't know if somebody within our congregation may end up having a situation where they're in a wheelchair or they're in a walker or whatever, that they can't get to those places. So I think it's hard. So I still think the government's a way of regulating is not a way I would call it. I think as churches should say, hey, we should do what's recommended by, industry standards, I call it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I agree with Rob. I can almost promise you there's not a church out there who would feel like they wouldn't want to be easily accessible by anybody.
Right.
For whatever reason, any handicap whatsoever. So I see that any church doesn't need to be told by the government how they should make their church accessible.
I totally agree.
If there's laws that they pass for other businesses, I guarantee you the church would look at, is that a need here? And if so, let's implement it.
Right.
I know we would. I feel wholeheartedly that we would here at Newaygo. So.
Yeah, and I'm all for building codes for making sure that things meet certain standards and stuff for anything new construction wise.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, churches aren't exempt from new construction codes of complying with them. As far as I'm aware, I'm not aware of anything on that aspect of things. So I totally agree with that. But to go back and try to make a historical, building or something like that, make them do massive renovations in order to accommodate stuff. I'm like, I'm willing to bet that if those people want people to come into their church and stuff. I mean, it's obviously, if we don't welcome everybody and stuff, I mean, the church will write its own fate in that aspect and stuff. Yeah. if they act that way. So I don't see that that's something that the government needs to be involved in.
Question number 4. Some reports say that 1 in 4 members of every parish has a physical or non-physical disability as defined by the ADA. Do you know who these people are in your church? Is there anything about your building setup that keeps them from participating in your church? Are there unspoken attitudes among the attendees that might discourage a person with a disability from attending? And what does your church do intentionally to include people with disabilities and their families?
Hmm.
So the first question, do you know who the people are? Yes, we do.
We've got a very good understanding of those who.
And is there anything about our building setup that keeps them from participating in church? Not necessarily from participating in the main function of church, but definitely some things that restrict people. We've got, we're 100-year-old building. I mean, we've got restrictions for accesses to parts of the building, the basement being one of them and stuff. And I know there's members of our congregation that can't get down there right now.
Yeah.
And it's.
But it's also the last part of the question. Go ahead.
It's never stopped us from making sure that they're fully included, and we alter what we do and how we do it in order to make sure that they're included and they've got access to be able to participate in anything we're doing. So I don't foresee that it has been an issue in our church. I hope it hasn't. At least I've never seen it happen. If I did, it would have been. I would have definitely done something about it. Personally, and I think anybody else in our church would be the same way. I mean, that's just the way we are.
Like I said, the only things that I ever see is, of course, our Saturday morning breakfasts. Not everybody can navigate our steps to get down there, and that's held in our basement.
Food upstairs for 'em.
And that's what I was going to say. We also, I know we've done some funerals that I've done here where we get people coming in wheelchairs or walkers and stuff of that nature as well. And I always try to make sure, tell them, the luncheon is downstairs. For those who cannot navigate the steps, we do have people who will bring the food up here in the fellowship area for up here. So, and there's always a good portion that usually stay upstairs in the fellowship area upstairs. So we always end up having to run food back and forth for those individuals so they can still be part of the luncheon and still hold conversations and such. But those are the necessary steps that we have to take right now because, unfortunately, cost effectiveness for putting anything in that's going to help us to help those people get down here, it's not feasible for us. Even if we did have the costs, we're seeing a lot of other things because of the structure of this building. It just doesn't give way to a lot of the things that we could do.
How about your church, Corey?
Yeah, again, like I said, we are mainly our basement's used for children and youth stuff. And so we have had a few kids that have been in wheelchairs or can't get down. So what we've done is we've made the shift. Instead of going in the basement, we've got a couple of rooms in our fellowship hall, and they've used that. So again, same way we try to, those we point out and we connect with, and even within our parking lot, we've kind of come to understand who's handicapped, who has the ADA, on the back of their bumper. And so we've talked about as a church, do we need to add a few more handicap spots up front just to be, accommodating to the handicap aspect of the church, or is it, is our church members okay? What does it look like in those ways? So we try to accommodate as best we can with those that we have that are handicapped or who are in a wheelchair because they hurt themselves or such. So, I think we're good at that.
I want to talk about the other one part of the question that we kind of missed. Are there unspoken attitudes among attendees that might discourage a person with disability from attending? I don't feel that there's unspoken attitudes from those who are not handicapped. I feel that there are some attitudes within the handicapped people in our church that are unwilling to do some of the things that we could do to help them out. Like we looked into a chair thing that would come downstairs, and that was shut right down because we have some that say, nope, I won't use that. Or the ramp is very long because of the grade, and we have some that say, well, that's too far for me to go. And we say, well, we have wheelchairs, we can push you up in the wheelchair. Well, I don't need a wheelchair yet. Well, so I do think that there is some embarrassment, or I can still do this on my own, that needs to be worked on within the people who are becoming handicapped or are handicapped, where we need to find a way to make them understand that it's okay and we want to help them and we're not judging them and we want to do what we can to get them involved in.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say necessarily an embarrassment thing. I think it's an independence thing.
Yeah.
And they feel that if they succumb to those types of things, then they're giving up some of their independence, and they want to maintain that they can take care of themselves and they can do for themselves. And I get that, and I do, and I understand that and stuff. But it is, it is unfortunate sometimes because I've dealt personally with what Deb's talking about, where it's like, you know, I've flat out offered numerous times to assist somebody, and they're always like, nope, I got it. And I'm like, I'd rather help you now than to have to help you up. you know, and it's like, and I don't know if they feel like they're being a burden. They're not. So if they do, if that's what they're feeling and stuff, I would like them to, hopefully they're watching this and understand that they are not a burden. You know,
Right.
we genuinely want to help them and want them to be safe and comfortable and have access to what they, you know, what they want to have access to. And we're more than happy to help them in any way whatsoever. I mean, obviously we've got the ramp, and like you said, it's a long walk to walk up that ramp. And it's like, you know,
Very fun to shovel in the winter.
it is.
I think we're blessed to have such a great sound system
Oh, yeah.
because there are people in church who have hearing disabilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not as great as you think it is.
Hey, they're trying to give you kudos, Rob. Come on now.
It's
And I'm
we're
thinking,
it,
hard to do about that.
it's easy to hear. Yeah, it is easy to hear, and you know, and stuff. And we've got, you know, good amplification of the sound, that's for sure. But the sound system is in desperate need of
Our sound system.
update.
Our sound system for in-house is not that bad. It's
Yeah.
the sound system that we're struggling with now being forced into this online situation. And this is actually probably a great thing too, because we have a lot of homebound people who can't come to church anymore, who are now depending on our weekly online message. And so now our sound system we're starting to see some flaws in those areas where we need help and some new arrangements with our sound system to help so they can hear everything at home, so they're not
It's
kept
not-
away from service as well.
It's not my tablet, it's the sound system.
It's not your tablet, it's our sound system.
Well,
And,
sometimes
well,
it might be your
Sometimes
tablet.
it could be, but
It's twofold. It is, you know, it could be, I don't know what tablet you got or how that's working, but the sound system obviously has definite obvious issues with the online feed and being able to pull the audio out and record it and or broadcast it. But then even the in-house system has been band-aided so many times because we've had failures, we've had issues with it, and we keep band-aiding it and those types of things. And there's some things that are not in compliance with what they should be in compliance with, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But there are some issues with the system where it does need it's in dire need of an upgrade, or an update, I should say. It's not necessarily an upgrade; it just needs to be, you know, updated with recent equipment and stuff, because the stuff we have is failing left and right. And so we keep throwing band-aids on it, and sooner or later we're going to run out of band-aids. So
Number 5, because we're way off track.
way off topic.
no, actually that always works, like I said, because it does fit with those who can't come to church on a regular basis. They need the online message.
It's stuff we're trying to do to accommodate more and more people. And like you said,
So,
and outside of the pandemic and stuff, we've got a number of people that can't make it to church. And honestly, the pandemic has led to them having more resources from the church than they've ever had. It drove us into this digital church service and other services like the Wired Word here and stuff. I mean, these are things that a lot of them didn't have access to before. So hopefully they're partaking in this. Hopefully they're watching these and they're getting benefit from it. So,
and they are. And like I said, I've had several of them who can't come to church anymore. And they've called me when I've talked to them on the phone and stuff. They've told me that they're very grateful that we're now doing this, because now they feel like they're back at the church again. They feel like they're actually part of the congregation once again. Something that they haven't been able to do in a couple of years. So they're very excited about this. So yes, like I said, this is actually, this whole online presence is helping us reach back out to those that used to come on a regular basis, but now for whatever reason can't. So it is part of that whole.
You know what we should do for them to get them involved in like the Wired Word and that type of stuff? We should get a loaner tablet and stuff. We can, sanitize it, clean it between each person, and we can get disposable headphones and stuff so they can just keep them, just cheap ones and stuff so they got headphones. And we just loan them the tablet and say, just click this button, and then you're going to be part of the Wired Word Live, and you can discuss with us what's going on.
Oh,
It's really great, you know. But if you're one of these people that are computer illiterate, some things are not so easy.
I
Well,
tell you,
it's, that's what I'm saying. If we do it as a loaner, it'll be all set up where you literally just touch this button and you're go.
There you are.
Yeah. We could do that.
So
Hey, they can do it for me. They
I
can do it for you. Like I said, our district
I
superintendent.
shouldn't brainstorm while we're live broadcasting. That's probably not a good idea because I'm going to get myself into more work.
Our district superintendent, our district superintendent's office called and asked me to oversee and help other pastors to be the online presence that we are. And I said, whoa, all they taught me how to do is hit record, hit stop record, and hit send. That's all they taught me how to do. So
that's because you got Rob.
thankfully I got Rob and Deb here that,
Yeah.
they are.
Rob's gone.
Oh, Rob left.
Number 5. What do you think God wants people who have no apparent disabilities to learn from the presence among us of people with disabilities?
That's a good one. I mean, I should say it's a good one, but it's
I think we've answered it.
like you said earlier, Deb, that there's certain people that think that, you know, or even Rob, you know, that they don't want the help. There's that wall that gets thrown up sometimes when you're trying to have conversation with those of disability. You know, they think that they're owed something. They're not owed something. They don't need help. They need help. I mean, you kind of keyed on it earlier, and I think it's a twofold there. God wants us to be gracious and loving towards those of people that are in wheelchairs or have walkers or you know, whatever handicap they have. You know, God's called us to love them, but in reality, sometimes it's so hard because when we're trying to love on them, what does it look like? So I think God, you know, he's really clear and says, hey, love all people. You know, walk along with everybody. Don't just try to, you know, to be who you are and make fun, poke, you name it. God wants us to care for the people that are going through whatever disability they have.
You know, Harriet said earlier, we're all getting older. So at some point, we're all going to be in this situation. So it's you know, I think that's one of the things it's teaching us is how do we want to be treated when that time comes? How do we want to be looked at? So we want to make sure that it's still accessible for us when we're put in that
So
situation.
bear that in mind.
Yeah.
I think it also can teach us thankfulness. That, you know, I'm thankful every day that I have the ability to walk around and I have the ability to do my own, you know, work, whatever.
Mhm.
I know that when my son was young, he has an immune deficiency and severe asthma. He was sick all the time when he was young. And he would be home from school for a week to 2 weeks at a time. And we'd get truancy letters on him every year because he was out of school so much. And I would take him to a specialist and be all sad and, oh, I can't take this anymore. And then in would come a mom pushing a kid in a wheelchair with a trach. And I'd be like,
Yeah,
I got it
that's
pretty
bad.
good right now, you know? So I think it can teach us some of that. My life isn't as bad as I think it is, you know, some of the more, be more thankful for what you have. My son can do his own things. He's an adult now and he doesn't have a tracheotomy. He doesn't have to be pushed in a wheelchair. And, you know, was he sick all the time? Yep. Was it a pain? Yep. But it wasn't near as bad as what some people have either, you know?
I am very thankful that I can get around and do what I do.
Mhm, absolutely.
I pray to God every day and thank him for blessing me with the ability to do what I
Keep
can do
moving.
and when I can do it. Yeah.
All right, Rob, you want to read the scriptures?
All right. So Leviticus 9:14. You must not insult a deaf person or put some obstacle in front of a blind person that would cause them to trip. Instead, fear your God. I am the Lord. And then jumping to 9 through 18. So in Leviticus 19, 9 through 18 was part of the holiness code of ancient Israel. The description of what is meant for all persons to live a holy life. A description that reaches its high point in 9:18 with the summarizing statement, you must love your neighbor as yourself. So verse 9:14 quoted above not only prohibited ridiculing persons with these two physical disabilities, but was also concerned with not allowing such persons to be taken advantage of. and to note that the way one treated such person was related to how one honored or feared one's God. So the question on this, why do you think the quote verse ends with, I am the Lord?
Well, like he says in the Bible, you must not insult a deaf person or put an obstacles in front of a blind person. You want to treat people the way the Lord would expect you to treat them.
So what does Jesus say? That what you do to the least of these, you do to me.
Right.
So I think that's what I think of when I heard that I am the Lord. I'm thinking of Jesus when he says that what you do to the least of these, you do to me. Is that if you're not respecting the handicap, then you're not respecting Jesus. You're not respecting God.
I personally read that as he's the only one that's any better than anybody else. I'm not any better or any worse than anybody else.
Blind or deaf or not.
He is the Lord. He is the only one that is better than anybody else. All others are equal as far as I'm concerned. So that's to me what he's saying, I am the Lord. You're not. So you're not any better than they are. That's how I read it.
We all have our own handicaps, regardless whether we see it or not.
Yeah.
I interrupt people all the time.
I do no such things.
Rob lies, if everybody wants to know that.
You're just pleading the fifth.
Just on that account.
Just on that account, yeah. He's pretty trustworthy otherwise. Matthew 21:14-15. The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he cured them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the amazing things that he did and heard the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they became angry. For context, it says read 21:12-17. These verses are part 2 of the incident where Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers and animal sellers in the temple. So it's not surprising that the chief priests and scribes were already angry at him. Still, we might have expected that the sight of Jesus subsequently curing the blind and the lame would have awakened their empathy for the afflicted. But no, they became angry. Granted, their anger was also driven by Jesus's growing popularity, so much so that children were praising him. But these religious leaders, who above all should have been concerned about the well-being of the people, could not spare a drop of gladness that some people were being freed of their physical disabilities. If asked about their hard-heartedness, we can imagine them saying something like, it's not the healings we object to, it's the principle of the thing. Oh, don't we hear that a lot today?
Yeah.
Oy. Questions. There's a lot of questions, so let's do one at a time. When seeking a parking place in the lot of a busy store, what did you feel when finding that the only open spot was reserved for persons with an official handicap play card or plate?
Be thankful that you don't have to use it and make sure that somebody that isn't handicapped isn't parked there.
Yeah, that doesn't offend or make me angry at all.
Me either.
In fact, I have yelled at other people who have a handicap sticker in their car for someone who's not in the car with them for using it. And I say, no, they're not in here. You don't need it. But I could see some people being angry about that if they had to park, a mile down the street to go someplace. Some people feel that entitled nowadays.
Yeah, and we're in America. In America, sorry, there's a lot of people that are overweight and could, Lord forgive me, they could use a little bit of a walk. There's people that it doesn't hurt to. When my family, when we get to the park spot, we literally park at the back when there's still 50 spaces. We're parked in like the back lot. We walk. We don't care. Because to me, I feel like as a leader, maybe it's myself is I'd rather give somebody else that opportunity to have the front seat than me. And I don't mean to be negative, but I think that's what happens is entitlement. I need that spot. But my fear is on that note. You were talking about. I'm glad somebody can have it and that utilizes it. I don't know, maybe it's in this question, is the people that use it that don't need it. When you walk by, when you see somebody that, I guess, I have a hard time when a big truck pulls up, huge big truck, and I get, person gets out and they're walking fine, but they got in the sticker the back of the vehicle. Then I have to stop myself and say, wait, I don't know what's really going on. I don't know if they just had knee surgery months ago or what it looks like. And I have to stop myself because I will sometimes, as a person, start to be like, what are they? Why are they? Come on, And I got to stop and say, wait a minute, it's not for me to judge. I just have to,
There are a lot of unseen handicaps also.
That's right.
I was going to say, we got to be careful with that because I too, I am one that likes to park in the back of the parking lot and just walk those extra few steps, even though there's many empty spots in between me and the building. But there was one time I parked in, I think I stopped at Dunham's and I parked in the back. And as I'm walking in, a truck pulls up and it pulls into the handicap spot. The guy and the woman jump out of the truck. They both look young and healthy, and he'd reach into the back of the truck, digging around. I'm sitting there thinking, seriously, you had to take a handicap spot? But then he comes walking around the truck, and he's got a false leg. It's like, oh, all right, sorry. So I had to, in that moment, ask God for forgiveness for automatically stereotyping this gentleman because he parked in a handicap spot. And I thought, you look young and healthy. What are you doing parking there?
Yeah.
So like I said, be careful with that first initial thoughts.
Yeah.
I get real frustrated. I've had, conversations or people talk, and stuff where they're like, well, I got my mom's handicap permit. I'm like,
Don't see your mom.
it's not yours. It's not, type thing. And it's like, man, it's like, it's the same thing when, businesses do like a veteran discount.
Mm.
And, I actually had somebody like, gonna go to the run of the stores. Like, well, I can go with you and I'll get you the veteran discount. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm like, they give the discount for a reason to people for a reason, not so they can share it with every single person around them. If that was the type of discount it was, then they would put it out there, friends and family discount, type thing. It's just that really does irk me a lot. I mean, when people do any of those types of things.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not the intent of that.
Taking advantage of the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's I'm like, I have no problem walking the further distance. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So
So I pick up Ruth Sunday mornings and we use your handicap sticker. Is that okay?
It's Ruth, so it's she needs it, and therefore she's with you. So
I get
Yep.
I tell
You
her
have the person with the disability
Yeah,
with you.
I
So it's
oh yeah,
okay.
that is absolutely 100% legit. I'm talking about somebody that's not even with them and stuff, and they're just using it so they can
Right.
park close at the mall, and it's like,
Right.
that's ridiculous.
yeah.
And we've
Sorry,
kind of
that's funny.
answered the next question partially. It says, answer this question from the perspective of a person with no mobility disabilities, and then answer it from the perspective of a person with mobility disabilities. If you've seen a person park in a handicapped slot who didn't appear disabled, how did you feel?
I think we covered that.
Yeah.
I think we covered that. Now, from a person who does have mobility disabilities, I would look at it, but this is just me. I would think that if I was unable to walk well or whatever, because mobility is different than other kinds of disabilities, I would look at it and think, I think it would be hard because you as somebody that has a disability, you would have the compassion for others with disabilities. But if it's not a mobility disability, do they really need that closer parking spot or something like that? Because there are people who are disabled and have disabilities for things that are not mobility ones. So
Right.
I don't know.
It's like
That
it's like
point of
the expected mothers. When you go to like certain stores, they've got the expected mothers, or like they've got even the ones now that have if you're a vet, you can park up here in all those places. And sometimes you walk by and you see that lady that's looks like she's had 7 kids and she's got one on the she's just utilizing. It's like it's interesting on the standpoint where I could assume that maybe she's pregnant, she's expecting. You can't make assumptions either as well. I think, and that's where when we look at the feeling on both sides of it, that handicapped person can't make an assumption that I'm going to say something to them, and nor should I have make an assumption I should say something to them, because in reality I shouldn't say anything at all.
Right. The next question part of it says, might they have disabilities that are not immediately obvious? Have you ever been tempted to cheat with a handicap play card? I have never been tempted to cheat with one because I yell at somebody else that I have with me often about cheating. Because I just think that those, the people who are handicapped or the pregnant moms or the vets, they've earned that spot for that day. I mean, I'm 5'3", and when I was pregnant, I didn't want to walk very far. It's bad enough being overweight, let alone adding that baby weight on there. I gladly will give that pregnant mom the spot closer because it's tiring. So it's hard. It's hard because we're humans to not judge people, not to be ornery with them. You want to read now, Pastor Eric? They're probably tired of my voice.
All right. We got John 5:2-7. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida. Yeah, sounds close enough. And which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, Do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. The pool by Jerusalem Sheepgate was supposed to have healing powers, but only at certain miraculous moments, which attribute to the stirring of the waters to the activity of an angel of the Lord, and say that only the first one into the pool at such moments was healed, do not appear at the older Greek manuscripts of John, in both the NIV and the NRSV, as well as in the several other Bible translations. We'll get off that. In any case, at the pool, Jesus comes across a sick man who has lain beside it for 38 years while hoping for the opportunity to enter the pool at the right time and be healed. When Jesus asks the man if he wants to be healed, the man explains that he has no one to help him into the pool. And apparently, movement under his own power is so slow that others always get into the pool ahead of him. This man's response should not be viewed as an excuse. It is a clear statement about the shortage of support services in that time for people with disabilities. We could ask where this man's parents were, but if he had lain at the pool for 38 years, then he had to be at least that old, and quite possibly his parents were deceased. At minimum, they may have been at work trying to make a living, and after delivering him poolside each morning. Jesus, of course, overcame all of that and healed the man, but not everyone has the opportunity for a miraculous healing. The question is, how are the support services for persons with disabilities in your community adequate? And how do you know?
Well, unless you're a disabled person, it's kind of hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to hope that if somebody's services for a disabled person were inadequate, that person would bring that up to that, whether that's that business or that entity or that, our church, if that were the case. If our services or our accessibility was inadequate for somebody, I would hope that they would say something and give us the opportunity to figure that out. But I understand a lot of times, we talked about it earlier and stuff, sometimes pride and those types of things keep people from saying something. But the problem is if we don't know it's a problem, how do we fix it?
That's true.
It's true.
Right.
Being in the church for the last 15 years and getting phone calls for different help situations and things like that, I do have to say that we live in a county that is probably not adequate, but is much better than other counties for people with handicaps. We have, there's busing that drives handicapped people around 2 or 3 times a week, and there's a number that they can call to get rides to doctor's appointments. And so, and food is available everywhere in Newaygo County. You shouldn't go hungry in Newaygo County.
Commission on Aging.
Yeah.
Commission on Aging.
So I do think that Newaygo County is a county that does a good job. I'm sure if I were a disabled person, I'm sure that there are places where we could do better. But I do think that we have a lot available if people are given the resources. That's the issue. You know, do they know where to go? Do they know who to
The
call?
information to get to it.
Are they willing to go there? Are they willing to call?
I was just saying, if they have the information, are they willing to go?
Sure. Good point.
How about you, Corey? We're not letting you talk very well today.
No, that's good. I'm glad. No, I'm not really familiar with it. Again, I think the ladies hit it on the head there. You know, if we're not disabled, we don't know if we have the adequate truth or not. I think it's truth. I don't, my church, I think, our community where I'm at, my area, I think we have good, adequate stuff. But again, in the community, I'm 7 miles from the community. I don't spend too much time in town, so I don't really know what there is or isn't. I mean, you go by, it looks like there's enough handicap spaces for people. But again, with the population, we may be not adequate, again. So yes, what you see, I guess, again, it comes back to, in the end of the day, ask those that are disabled in the community, because if they all try to park at Meyer at the same time here, they may have to pick a far out spot,
Right.
I mean, so yeah.
Are there support services for persons who care for disabled individuals in your community adequate? We kind of answered that.
I think there.
How do you know? Harriet said she thinks there is.
Who pays for them?
Yeah, who pays for them and who decides who should receive the services?
Who decides who is to pay for the support services?
In
Many of ours are I think,
Newaygo County, yeah, some of it in Newaygo County is funded through tax dollars. A huge chunk of the support services and the funding for it comes through nonprofits, especially like through the foundation. I know the Fremont Area Foundation is huge as far as funding for a lot of those services.
I think we have like the Gerber Foundation, Love in the Name of Christ. Those are all fund different things that are huge. Luke 17:12-13. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. For context, read 17:11-19. In terms of our topic, the key words in the verses above are keeping their distance. This comes from the account of Jesus healing 10 individuals who had leprosy. In that time, leprosy was an untreatable, contagious illness. The only way the people knew how to deal with it all was by isolating its victims from the rest of the populace. The Old Testament laws even had provisions about lepers. The person who has the leprous disease shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. That's Leviticus 13:45-46.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. Thus, people, in fact, accept that we're not isolating only the sick, we're isolating everybody. Thus, people infected with this terrible disease were outcasts. They could live in colonies with others like themselves, but they had to steer clear of everyone else. They were distanced physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Lepers sometimes congregated near village entrances to beg for alms, but they dared not get too close. That's where these 10 miserable infected persons were when Jesus entered a certain village. Having heard of his reputation as a healer, they cried out to him for mercy. But in keeping with the policy, they kept their distance while doing so. Luke does not tell us how physically close Jesus came to the 10, but we do know that on another occasion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched a leper to heal him in Matthew 8:1-3. But what's more important here is not how near he came to these 10 physically, but that he allowed himself to feel their misery and then reached across the social distance to address them as fellow human beings, not as outcasts. Questions. In what ways, if any, has the current experience of being socially distanced enhanced your understanding of the plight of the lepers in this story?
Yeah, you can really relate to that.
You can really relate to that, Jane.
Yeah.
Especially some that live alone originally. You know, I have my husband at home, so I can talk to him and do things with him outside. Some of you that live alone might not have that ability anymore.
No, we don't.
So you really understand those lepers living on their own, huh?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think persons with disabilities prior to the ADA felt about the barriers that prevented or made it difficult for them to participate in education, employment, shopping, social activities, and other public activities?
I
I
think
think that was answered earlier. Eric, I think, said something earlier on that line. I think he said something about it'd be hard. Even like you said, talking about shot, things with your son. It was hard to do if you didn't, that, and so, I mean, yeah.
if I was like, and I guess if I start thinking back then, and if I was all of a sudden handicapped and in a wheelchair, I would have almost felt like my life was over. And nowadays, there's so much available for even those who are in wheelchairs, those with many different disabilities. There's a lot has opened up because of this act for these individuals and has made them become part of society again, made them feel like they're actually worth something. So it's, I think that's a great concept, a great thing for them. Because I think often about it. If I was ever put in a chair back then, I probably would have been the same way. I mean, you hear of a lot of these people before used to be suicidal, and some you still hear today. They feel like their life is pretty much over, but we don't hear of it as much as we used to, because I think we have done a great job of making them still feel like they're part of society. So
I know that we've done a better job in the recent future too, or recent past too, because if you look at beaches, there are some beaches that have handicap things that not ramps, but boardwalks that go right down to the water. I went to a lake yesterday when I was taking pictures called Pickerel Lake, and they have a boardwalk that goes right from the parking area where the handicap parking spots are. It goes all the way out and across the far end of the lake. It's a huge boardwalk that goes almost all the way across the lake.
They did at the dam there, and they've got this great big thing.
There's
they
fish
can fish
ponds.
right off of that into the river.
Mhm.
yeah.
So we're doing better for people that are mobility handicapped, but
Look at the vans they have nowadays. People can
Oh.
get in the van, get in the driver's seat, and drive.
Yep. I was watching a show yesterday where they did a custom make on a van for a handicapped guy that's been in a wheelchair for 16 years. He hadn't drove in 16 years, and they custom made a van for him. So now he got his freedom of being able to drive again. It was great.
there's parks that are built so you can wheel wheelchairs up on a swing and the kid can swing right in their wheelchair and things like that.
Especially for little.
Yeah. So we have about 2 minutes left.
We're right on the verge here of our timeline. So
Does anybody have anything else they want to say?
I'm good.
all right, I'll close this out in prayer today. Thanks everybody for participating, and it's awesome to see some more people, more faces on here, some more opinions, and some more discussion. That's always welcomed, and hopefully we can continue to work out the bugs and get things to work well for doing this blended, where we have some people gathering at the church and some people online. So we'll obviously continue to move forward with making all of this technology better serve our members.
Yeah.
As a whole.
For those who are out there, this is the way we did it before. We had a group that always met at the church, and then of course with the pandemic and all the things closing down, we had to revert to something different, and that's when we developed this. We came up with this idea of doing this online way style. So now that we're starting to come back together, we're looking at this whole blended thing and how we can still keep the best of both worlds. We can still come together as a group and have the discussion, and then invite all of you out there into the middle of that discussion as well. And it's still the same thing. If you ever have a comment about what we're saying, feel free to write it in the comment section, and it'll pop up to where we can, and it'll help fuel some of our conversation here on this end as well.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank
All
you.
right, I will close this out in prayer today. Since I usually pick on somebody else, I'll pick on myself today, since I think all of us were a little fumbling getting started with the broadcast. If anybody watched the beginning, they'll understand some of that as we were struggling to get things moving. So
Must be a good prayer in the end of it, huh?
there is. All right, let us pray. Oh God, sensitize us to the humanity of the persons with disability in our midst. Let us not make them invisible. Help us to be genuinely supportive, as well as of those who provide daily care to others. Enable us, like Jesus, to bridge the distance that keeps us from seeing the struggles of those in need around us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you guys very much, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.